I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps, a book club podcast.
An immortal book club podcast, dude. Just like these guys.
Yeah?
Yeah. Dude, this is one of the first times I've run into like immortality in a book series ever, you know? And it's been kind of interesting, actually. Like, I didn't think it would be as interesting as I found it. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense. It seemed to me like with just like these guys being immortal, like that was just going to be that, like they could only cure them from like foreseeable deaths or whatever. But in this world, they can cure them like after they've died. It sounds like,
yeah,
you know. So it's just been it seemed to. I don't know, the rules in this world are just kind of loose with life, it seems like. And I wonder how long you can be dead before, like, coming back. Like, if they could just preserve your body. Like, if the Scythes picked people to die and they just preserved your body, if they could just bring everybody back when they have a new planet to terraform or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is an interesting thought.
Because it doesn't seem like there's any cap on how long you can be dead or how dead you can be. It seems like you can be splattered and then they'll just take your goo and like put you in a machine.
Right, yeah. It seems, the only thing that keeps somebody dead is the absence of taking them to the rejuvenation center.
Exactly, yeah.
So that is an interesting question. I suppose at a point your corpse decays.
Yeah.
So unless they actually, like you said, preserve you like in a freezer, there is definitely a time limit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah.
That would be interesting if that ever did come up. This is a first book of a series.
Yeah.
So conceivably it could come up in later novels.
Yeah. Do you remember how many are in this series?
I don't.
Yeah.
Is it even finished? Because that's part of the question.
Yeah.
This is the book that Joan suggested on Twitter, and that we took the suggestion from just like an errant tweet that you said that she had posted saying that she finished this book and thought it was good.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, fuck it, let's just go with that.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten any suggestions.
We had not given ourselves the time to find any, and we figured why the transition of going from her book to a book she suggested seemed to fit, or at least that's the justification we give, because we did not give ourselves the time to come up with our own.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it did kind of transition pretty easily, because it is a bit of a different universe.
A bit of a different universe.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously it's a different universe, but it's got just like its own set of rules, but it's still in the same... I feel like it's still in the same vein, because it's like a young adult like fiction, so it
yeah.
I guess I just feel like the writing style isn't too far off from what we were reading, you know? Like, it just kind of feels just like an easy transition into more of a similar... I don't know, I feel like the narrator for this book could have been just as easily the narrator for the last book. I mean, they're all the same if you're reading them in your head, you know? But
no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, they have a very similar writing style, I think. At least they kind of seem to me. And maybe that's just young adult fiction. But I don't know, I've enjoyed it. It kind of just feels like a fun transition to a new book. I don't know, I like it. It's I haven't run into too many complaints yet.
Yeah.
What do you think?
We were talking about, before recording the Game of Thrones podcast earlier, I'm just engaged at this point. And, I don't have anything to complain about just yet, but the first bit that we've read has just been part of place setting.
Yeah.
We're just kind of setting up the rules of the universe as the characters know them and getting introduced to what's going to become their story arc. And then, with it being a series as well, that story arc's going to continue for longer than this book, so it doesn't even have to come to a conclusion within the book that we're reading.
Yeah, and who knows how much actually will come to a conclusion. I'm sure we'll get to some sort of like...
The novel has to end in them becoming Scythes, right?
I would think so.
And then the fight becomes the curing of the corruption that has entered the Scythedom.
Yeah.
Like that, I guess that's what the overall thing is going to be. Because we're being, these characters are being presented to us as candidates for Scythedom that don't want it. which Scythe Faraday, our main character Scythe until the very end of this section of reading, is one of the more austere and honorable Scythes in the sense of the word, not just their title.
Yeah.
And we've also been presented with other Scythes that are less so.
It was interesting how they introduced us to the Scythe Faraday, because we meet him with
each character, Citra and Rowan,
and just it's him doing his scythe work when like around them as kids. And Citra and Rowan are kind of the two main characters. They are the two main characters that we're following. Both of which have like kind of separately realized like I don't think we'd be friends unless we were forced to hang out,
Right. Yeah.
And it's never been done before where a single scythe will take two apprentice scythes as his. So it's I don't know. It's interesting just that like they met him as like when they were so impressionable, and like being like one of the main requirements for becoming a scythe, at least according to Scythe Faraday, was the fact that you don't want to be one. Because like if you want to have the power to kill people in an immortal society, that's probably like the worst kind of person to have around, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about it earlier. Like if I had to be a scythe, it sounds like the easiest kind to be would be one like for like a mass murder kind of like a hurricane or disaster, like a natural disaster kind of guy. You just come in and be like, all right, well, an earthquake I say would have happened right now, so let's just wipe out like 40 people and then I'll hit my quota and I don't have to work for a couple. I mean, I'd be the laziest scythe. I'd just kill a bunch of people probably in one day, hit my quota, and of course I'd be.
Well, they talk about that in one of the excerpts from Scythe Curie's journal, where there are scythes who get it all out of the way right away, or procrastinate and then have to get their quota matched before the next conclave. But that often leads to unintended bias and stuff like that. So then you'd be up for review.
Oh yeah,
and then you would be in trouble, after a few conclaves if that was going to be your method.
It's kind of funny how the scythes are put. They're kind of put in a light of being not necessarily gods, but kind of a higher status.
Well, they're above literally everybody else.
Yeah. And yet they're still just so human. They procrastinate, they'll put off their work until the very end. There's a variety of each bias. Of them, some are corrupt, which is probably like you said, going to be a plot point of maybe not this book, but the next one. And I don't know. It's like they're so human, even though they're like a class above. Right. It'll be fun, and it's cool too because it's kind of relatively in like the youth, they'd say, of like the being like of an immortal society, because they don't know the exact date of how old they are, but they're guessing like about 300-400 years like that they've been turning the corner, right?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, so the thing is that now they're immortal, and the Thunderhead can take care of everything because the Thunderhead literally knows everything that there is possibly to know, because it's a perfect AI. The reason to want to know things like how long it's been or anything is completely gone. So there's no reason for anybody to care how long it's been. And there is a point where in one of Curie's, every chapter begins with one of Curie's journal entries until the very last one where we get one from Goddard's. And in one of those, it says something like, at some point we stopped counting years, the year that we conquered mortality, and then no one remembers when we just changed to the Chinese New Year, or to the Chinese calendar, and no one remembers when we stopped repeating the animals and started just using random new animals. It could be found out in the Thunderhead. Someone could look at the record of every year that's happened, but nobody gives a shit because it means nothing.
Right? Yeah. What is it?
Because you're going to live forever, assuming you don't get gleaned. But I think, then Curie does the math in like a later journal entry, and over like you could live 1,000 years, and during those 1,000 years, your cumulative percentage chance for being gleaned would only be 50% at the current going rate. And if the population increases and they increase the gleaning rate, then your percentage could go up as well, depending on, the ratio of gleaning increase to population increase. But at the current going rate, it was evidently 1% chance over the course of 100 years or something like that.
Yeah. If by 1,000 years it's like a 50% chance, that'd be like if you and I were going to live to be 1,000, like one of us wouldn't make it, like they wouldn't let one of us, which would be kind of lame. I don't want to be 1,000 if we're not both doing it.
Well, I think that, so the way that math increases is not like 1 in 2 people.
Right. Yeah. No, I know.
It's that you have a 50% chance of being gleaned over the course of those, because then the percentage compounds as well, because 1% over 100 years does not just like add 1 plus 1 plus 1 to 50% over 1,000. So there's some like, percentage math that I don't care to know.
Yeah.
But anyways, well,
I mean, it is kind of interesting how just like to glean somebody, it seems like there is no real rhyme or reason. It's just kind of like
they each do it in their own way.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I guess the way that we've been seeing with Faraday,
which is why they have those audits to, if you're too biased towards a certain class of people, or you're too biased towards a race of people, or people with whatever their genetic makeup is, because evidently nobody is like even like 30% any one ethnicity. But you might be 20% of it.
Yeah.
You might have a leaning in one direction.
Yeah, is that what the term they use, like leaning with Asian leaning?
They said that.
Like
that. Yeah, they used that term a couple of times. I don't remember it because I literally just finished reading it. I was late this week on reading. But it was your personal genetic or something like that. Whatever your percentage was. And they have like 5 classes. There was Pan-Asian, Afric,
Caucus,
like
that. Yeah.
And then whatever the Hispanic. The author seems to have just taken the first and last syllable off of some of these things and made that the new word for it. And then there's also a class of other, which I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
The ones you forgot.
I think that covers everything, though, because you got Asian, African, Hispanic, and white, and then other, which I guess is just... I guess it doesn't matter.
Samoan and stuff. The catch-all.
Pacific Islander.
Islander.
Arctic.
Yeah.
Because so I think that the year that they conquered death was like, I don't remember, but it was like 2570 or something like that. Like it was far future for, us, assuming, if we were to try to relate this to the actual world.
Do you remember them saying anything about like a world peace or anything? I don't remember, but I would assume.
I think with the advent of the Thunderhead, it almost immediately dissolved all government across the planet. There seems to have been a situation where there were still governments in different locations even after the Scythedom was around, because Scythe Curie went and killed the last president and his entire cabinet. And... which was evidently controversial, Faraday says, whenever they're, they go to conclave and, they're pointing at everybody and whatever. She seems to have taken it upon herself to have gotten rid of the last vestiges of American government or whatever. So it'd be interesting to see if that ends up meaning anything later on as well.
Yeah, I could see that being controversial, kind of.
Right, yeah. But there's evidently, the Thunderhead controls everything. And it seems to have done a good job. It's not like the Skynet fear. Like, it didn't rise up and kill all humans. It rose up and gave all humans utopia.
Yeah.
And then the Scythedom was decided that it was necessary to keep population in check to some degree. And it's outside of the Thunderhead, and the Thunderhead is outside of it. And so there's a balance there that...
You'd think they would... It'd be easier to just like sterilize everybody, but because or at least.
But it's a utopia because you still could have the joy of having a family if you so chose.
And you could have as many families as you want.
Yeah.
Because one of the guys they talked about having like 30 kids or something. He was
right. He was and people have been married and had divorces and moved to different countries and stuff like that. So there's still life is more or less as it was. Just the pursuit of different things has less meaning love sort of inherently has less meaning. Curie spends some time talking about in one of her journals.
Yeah, you're right. Everything does kind of have less meaning. I forgot that was like kind of a big point. Like how, I think it was the main, like the girl, Citra, she was thinking like how everything is like more boring now. Like how things probably used to not be as boring. Like you'd still get bored, of course, but like how there was still kind of a bit more of purpose to everything because there's a more finite time frame.
Right.
To make
like that's
relevant.
one of her characteristics is that she had kind of hoped that she could grow up and do something purposeful and useful, but she wasn't sure what that would be in this society where no job actually matters.
That would be... Man, I feel like there'd be so much depression. Like you'd have to either like medicate everybody, just like just neutralize, like kind of just numb everybody, or I don't know what you'd do.
Yeah, guess it seems like, and the problem with these kinds of books where you get into dystopian society is always that there's some level of it that's unbelievable.
Oh, for sure, you just gotta let it go.
Because, like you said, like there must be that you would assume that there's much more depression, and there seems to be. They spend a second talking about how like. The nanites that are in your blood that help you heal minor wounds and stuff like that can be edited to do different things, like help you curb your weight or help you curb like other things. But then also like the Thunderhead has cured all illnesses, so conceivably it's also cured all chemical imbalances that might lead to depression and things like that.
Oh, good point. I didn't even think about that.
And then, but then there's also still, I forget what the term they use for them, but the unsavories or something like that, the guys who just like are mischievous and
gross ones.
Like they cause a little bit of trouble, people who would be maybe criminals in our actual time, but they're just doing things like they're not even stealing. I don't remember what it even is that they do, but they do like dumb shit and then they just get like very lightly reprimanded, and you might end up getting like a personal parole officer for the rest of your life. But then, like, I don't know, it's just like, it seems like there's a lot of holes that can be poked in this, but that's just because it's such an improbable society to begin with that no one's going to ever write something perfectly when it's inherently flawed, because how could that happen? At least within our own imagination.
It was kind of interesting how like the kids in the beginning, like one of them was like an adrenaline junkie, so he would like just jump off buildings. And then he was like, "But my parents are forced to pay the rejuvenation fee,"
and that's why he wants to do it. Because,
so that he's noticed, because if they weren't forced, they wouldn't pay attention to him. So like they're not going to buy him a car, or go to pay for college, or do anything cool with him. They're just going to be like, whatever. He's just a stupid kid, and then. He just like kills himself in
he's like, well, this is how I can make them notice me, and then also
I shouldn't be laughing,
as a nice byproduct,
sad,
he finds out that it's actually kind of addicting.
Yeah, and luckily, like Citra, I think it was Citra that was hanging out with him. She's not like addicted, or
no, it was Rowan. Rowan was Citra. We didn't ever meet any of Citra's friends.
Okay, it was Rowan's. Yeah,
because Rowan was also unnoticed by his family, because he has a very
large
large family. He was like a middle child that didn't matter.
Yeah,
or
he called him the lettuce kid.
Yeah, like because they're the lettuce of the hamburger, like the least important part or the least noticeable part.
I thought that was really funny.
Just literally there as roughage.
Yeah, that's very funny.
Whereas Citra comes from a 2-child family, and they seem to be relatively close knit or whatever. Like they talk to each other and care about each other more than Rowan's family did.
Yeah. One thing that was cool is like you can't ever really know somebody's age unless they're a kid, like under 21, or that's it really. Like you can only know if they're under 21 what age they are. Basically.
Assumingly they have birth records as well, and so it could be found out in the Thunderhead. But again, no one gives a shit.
Right, and then but you could also guess how old somebody at least is, because they don't seem to have any sort of technology to age you. So you have to at least live to be whatever age.
Because it's all about rejuvenating yourself.
No, of course. Yeah. So why would you want to go the other way? So it doesn't make any sense.
Everybody resets at a certain point whenever they're ready to.
And some people reset just to a certain age. Like all the Scythes, it seems like they reset to some age in their mid-30s, I think is what it was saying in the book. And
I think that, or at least in one of Curie's journals, she said something about how she resets every now and then, but she's never reset to earlier than 40, like most Scythes.
Oh, than 40. Okay. Yeah.
And she has a quote about how the only Scythes that want to look young are the ones that are young.
That are young, yeah. I thought that was interesting too, because you have to live to be at least 40 to look
to then get back to 40.
Right, exactly.
Like,
So you can't just age up. So I thought that was kind of like I don't know, like I guess like a literal like coming of age.
Right.
Sort of
well, certainly
token.
once you've turned the corner a couple of times, you've had then however many years it was of experience
Plus, yeah.
doing, your very grim job.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how you view it, like, so the one who seems to be the source of corruption moving forward, Scythe Goddard and his crew, they're all very young. Scythe Goddard tells the millionaire that they go to take his home at the end of the section. He tells him that he hadn't turned the corner yet. So he's young enough that he's not gotten past, certainly not gotten past like 60 or 70 when you might think about turning the corner. Certainly for a job that is physically demanding.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be, at the very least, that's just like mildly critical to his character. I don't know that it's going to end up actually mattering, but I think that, it at least paints a picture of his character. We know that he's young, whereas Scythe Faraday has turned the corner 4 times.
Yeah.
I believe I remember him saying.
But yeah, I think so. Is Goddard, like, is that a name of
so they all take names of important historical figures.
And who is Goddard, I guess, is what I'm trying to...
I know the name, but I couldn't tell you. And we might as well look it up.
Yeah, I wonder if that'll be any sort of
his acolytes are kind of like the Pan-Asian one with the green robe. Her name is Rand, like Ayn Rand. So, there's a lot of opinions about Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the idea is to give them, if you give them a certain historical figure's name, they chose that name.
Right.
So you're immediately painting a picture of their character, So the fact that this one, styles herself after Ayn Rand definitely evokes a certain emotion. If I just type in Goddard, what does that give me? Not Goddard School. I don't give a shit about that.
Goddard School. Goddard's a dork, I guess, huh? I'm just kidding.
Let's see. Here is a Robert H. Goddard, born October 5th, 1882, died August 10th, 1945, was an American engineer, professor, physicist, and inventor who is credited with creating, and I had to load the actual page, building the world's first liquid-fueled rocket. Goddard successfully launched his model on March 16th, 1926, ushering in an era of spaceflight and innovation. He and his team launched 34 rockets between 1926 and 1941, achieving altitudes as high as 2.6 kilometers and speeds as fast as 885 kilometers per hour.
Okay, so my quick judgment is that this guy is going to be... He sees himself, Scythe Goddard, as like an innovator of the future.
Yeah, he seems to think that he's going to usher in a new era.
Exactly, like this guy ushered in the space race, the space era.
Whereas Faraday, who, our Scythe is considered, none of his work was appreciated or fully used until after he had died. And so, which this section of reading, Faraday gleans himself. So what we can assume is going to happen is that Citra and Rowan are going to usher in a new era for Scythe. And so we come full circle with the reason that Faraday named himself that.
How did he know?
Because the author wrote it so.
Right, yeah. Neil Schisterman or whatever his name is.
Let's get also the names of Goddard's other disciples, because I think that it could be interesting.
Yeah, now that we actually pulled up a few of them, I think it's definitely going to foreshadow a little bit of...
It's worth knowing, for sure, that at the very least paints a mood for the people that we're dealing with.
Yeah, what did Ayn Rand write?
The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, Anthem are her biggest 3. I think she might have written others. Ayn Rand's thing is sort of... What's the word that I'm looking for? Like self-awareness to the point of... I'm not good at describing it. Sometimes I find myself saying very Ayn Randian things. But on the whole, I don't subscribe to a lot of what she put forth philosophically. I do sort of agree with the fact that I think that everything any individual does is inherently selfish, which is a very Ayn Randian thing to say. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh, yeah.
What are fucking Goddard's disciples' names?
I don't remember. I honestly forgot Rand, but until you said it, so that was interesting. That was a good little refresher.
She's the only one that talks up until the point that they get to the mansion, and then the one with Afric leanings in the yellow robe talks, but I can't remember his name.
I wonder if they take their names too when they pass into Scythedom, Like, I wonder what Citra and Rowan's names they're going to take are going to be.
Scythes Volta, Chomsky, and Rand.
Volta. Mars Volta.
Mars band. Volta, the band. That's what they named themselves after. A band that doesn't even matter today.
I know. They had like one album that I know of. I'm sure they have more. Shout out to Mars Volta, I guess. Who are you looking up?
Volta first.
Okay, cool.
Jesus, it's used for so many different things. I will never find this. Here is a picture of an old person.
Mr. Volta.
Alessandro Volta.
Sounds like
was an Italian physicist, chemist, and pioneer of electricity and power, who is credited as the inventor of the electric battery and the discoverer of methane. He invented the voltaic pile in 1799 and reported the results of his experiments in 1800 in a 2-part letter to the president of the Royal Society. With his invention, Volta proved that electricity could be generated chemically and debunked the prevalent theory that electricity was generated solely by living beings. Volta's invention sparked a great amount of scientific excitement and led others to conduct similar experiments, which eventually led to the development of the field of electrochemistry.
Look at you. Look at Volta. All right. So he could be a good character, even though he's on the bad guys' team. Well, the presumably bad. Watch it turn into sort of a Watchmen deal. And then, sorry to throw back to Game of Thrones podcast. Did you see the Watchmen preview? They're going to make a show called Watchmen.
Oh, God, I'll tell you what I don't care about.
Right? We got enough with that.
I don't really understand what that show is trying to do just from that one preview. And I'm not like a big Watchmen theorist or anything. I've only even just watched the movie like twice.
Me too.
I found it very pretentious. So I don't. Maybe people who have read the graphic novel and studied it and really kind of bought into the whole idea of it. Maybe they could tell me what the show is evidently going to be about based off of the one preview. But me, I have no idea what the fuck they're doing. There's a bunch of people in Rorschach masks. Yeah. Which Rorschach dies and he ended up being like some say the true hero of Watchmen because he was the only one that was ever. I don't know. There's a lot of things that you can say about that.
Yeah, man. I just kind of thought I was like, what the hell's going on in this preview?
Noam Chomsky is a more relatable person. He was born in 1928. He's an American linguist, philosopher, and cognitive scientist, historian, political activist, and social critic. Sometimes called the father of modern linguistics, Chomsky is also a major figure in analytic philosophy and one of the founders of the field of cognitive science. He holds a joint appointment as Institute Professor Emeritus at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and Laureate Professor at the University of Arizona, and is the author of over 100 books on topics such as linguistics, war, politics, and mass media. Ideologically, he aligns with the anarcho-syndicalism and libertarian socialism.
Okay, so this is the politician of his group, the one that'll be like kind of ushering in the sort of libertarian ideals.
Perhaps. Who else was? Oh, and Rand. We already talked about Rand.
Interesting. And then so the only other two sites that I can think of are the ones that pick up the kids.
One of them is Goddard.
And then
so at the end. With the sort of thing that whenever they go to their first conclave, the apprentices go through a test every conclave that they attend or whatever, and in that everybody sees that Faraday has got 2 apprentices, and we can see that Faraday and Goddard are kind of at odds with each other because of their inherent ethical leanings in their business. And so one of Goddard's apprentices, Rand, then puts it to the conclave that they should have a stipulation on him having 2 apprentices, because it's never been done before, like you said, that one of them has to glean the other, whoever it is that wins,
Yeah, that's so like fucked up too. He's gotta watch, like, raise these two kids to kill, like, for them to kill each other. Basically,
Right.
It's like, ugh.
And so then that's why Faraday kills himself. Is that traditionally, whenever a scythe gleans themselves while they have an apprentice, the apprentice is then released from their duties and can just go back to normal life. But then, as we get revealed in the literal last paragraph, Honorable Scythe Curie is going to take on Citra, and Honorable Scythe Goddard is going to take on Rowan.
Yeah, because honestly, like, whenever they said that, like, a scythe could go back, like, if they don't pass the test or whatever after failing however many times, like,
they just go back to their
or after they, like, fail their personality test or whatever the case is for why they
it's just whenever so at the end of their year apprenticeship, they either pass or fail. And if they fail, they just go back to their normal life.
Dude, that, to me,
as normal as it can
so
be after
far-fetched.
having been an apprentice of the scythe for a year.
Oh, yeah. It seems like they would just take them down to the meat grinder, you know? Like, just like, all right, later. Like, you definitely don't get to go back to normal society. Like, because you're not normal. Like, we took you into our club. We taught you all our secrets. We're not just going to let you back out, you know? To me,
you would
it
think
seems
that
like something they
potentially, like, even just after, like, then 100 years of living, you would have had 100 years of living in normal society and you would just readjust. You would forget those lessons because they were literally longer ago than most people have lived.
Yeah, I guess that's right. They do pull in kids. It's not like they're pulling in, like, old people that have been, you know, turning around the corner or whatever, like, 4 or 5 times. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. Give them a second shot. I just immediately wrote him off because I'm so young, so I don't get it, you know? Them with all their, you know, resets, they understand that people deserve a second and a third chance.
I think that there's sort of a classic setup here of having two characters and then, you know, them being separated by good and evil forces.
Yeah.
Or, you know, what we are given to perceive as good and evil forces. In the same way that, like, we get, you know, we always go back to this, but the same way we get Aragon and Murtagh, and then they get separated. One gets raised in the abilities of being a writer by the evil emperor, and one gets, you know, raised in the abilities of being a writer by the good writers or whatever.
Right, and that's definitely what they're setting up for.
Yeah, Citra's going with Curie, who we have gotten a glimpse into how she thinks because we've been reading her journal entries every chapter, or not even every chapter, but every section.
Yeah.
And then
Goddard we know to be the kind of cruel one that does.
Yeah, because we've seen him do like 3 mass gleanings, and we've seen
none
like,
of which have been cool.
Yeah, even because all of his gleanings are through the perspective of one of the people at the mass gleanings, and we get the description of, like, you know, like the joy in his eye and exerting his power over them. And then also in that last section of reading where we see one of his journal entries, because the journal entries of all the Scythes are public record, he talks about why, like, he can't wait for all the old Scythes to glean themselves so that they don't have to hold to this archaic, you know, ethical, self-loathing idea that the old Scythes have brought it, you know, that it was founded on.
Mumbo jumbo.
Why shouldn't they enjoy their jobs?
Right. Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, he's ushering in the
Which,
new
again,
era,
he's one of the young Scythes, relatively speaking. So I think that the oldest Scythe is 300. One of the people that Faraday points out when they go to Conclave, they say, this guy's about 300 or so. He says he was here whenever the tenets were written down, but it's not true. He wasn't.
I looked it up. I checked with the...
Right, I checked with Thunderhead. It's not there.
I checked with the Google head. I mean, Thunder.
Right. It's really interesting. I'm excited to see where it progresses. Again, I'm not totally bought into either of the characters yet, although right at the very end, I think I'm kind of bought into the kids, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I like the kids.
I do like Citra. I like her attitude a little bit more than I like Rowan's attitude.
Yeah.
But I think that again, is by design because he's going to Goddard,
right.
You know, the Goddard school, not the one here in Austin.
They've got Goddard schools all over. It's for, like, smart.
Yeah.
Like, smart kids. Yeah, there's one by Alex. My brother's house.
I've seen them all over the place. You can see a couple of them driving down to Shiner.
But that's not where...
he's going to the Honorable Scythe Goddard and his acolytes. But he initially had a little bit more purpose than Citra did.
Yeah, and he seemed a little bit better at naturally a little bit better.
Yeah, he's like
I don't know why.
Yeah. He's like the naturally talented one to some degree, or what he takes to it a little bit more quickly than she does.
He's like
I guess
Sasuke.
is the more accurate way to say it. Sasuke.
And then Citra's like Naruto. She's got to work for it a little bit.
Right.
Now,
the fact that we can pull these two examples of this general story
from so many different
just shows that it's something that we've seen before, at least as a theme,
and it's a good theme, at least with ones that we've liked. The few suggestions we brought out, we've all liked. We've liked Aragon and Murtagh.
Now, the implementation of that theme can be anything,
right?
And hopefully, it's very enjoyable and good.
Do you think it'll go beyond this book? Do you think it'll go into the second one? I mean, it's probably too soon to tell, obviously, but
yeah, because I think that this one has to end with them becoming, now that they can both become Scythes because they're under different, sponsors, they have the opportunity to both make it to Scythedom.
Yeah.
So that's got to be how this one ends, right? And then it's they're, because then they're junior Scythes and they have to go through a period of being junior Scythes where they're still being, babysat by the Scythedom, and then whenever they, exit juniorness, then they can start changing things, or however that plot goes.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're probably going to make them still go at each other, and then whenever they don't,
because
Rowan start changing things. Then, because like in did you read Hunger Games?
I wanted to. I saw the first movie, and I was like, this was very enjoyable. I would like to read the series, and then I just never got around to it.
Yeah, it's kind of, that's another example of this plot line that we were kind of saying, the two characters, different kind of worlds.
I want to watch the rest of the movies just because Natalie Dormer's in them.
Yeah.
And I'm in love with Natalie Dormer. She has the same birthday as me.
Nice.
Just like 3 years older or something like that.
Ooh.
Anyways, continue.
Totally an option.
You're right.
Well, it's got the kind of vibe I feel like Hunger Games did, where like it ended with those two kids. Like we liked both of them, but the point of Hunger Games is one of them has to kill the other one in the end. They both can't win, and then they still made it so that they both won, which was the first time ever. So this is another situation where it's like the first time ever these two kids were under one apprenticeship, and then they survived because of Faraday's sacrifice. And it's just I feel like you're right. Like it's either going to be them coming into Scythedom like at the end, but they still might be pit against each other, but at some point they're definitely I feel like that's the big thing is they're gonna lead the revolution kind of on this.
Yeah,
it feels like that. I don't want to say that formula, but it feels like it's gonna go that way, which is cool. I've liked stories like that before, so I'm excited to see it unfold, because you're right, the telling of the story is really more what I'm into. You can spoil something for me and I'm still going to enjoy getting through the story. I like the telling and the getting there, not necessarily just
and it does depend on the story as well, because some stories are only their endings. If the whole point of it is that it's a mystery, like if we were reading a murder mystery and you knew who did it, you'd be like, okay, well, I don't give a shit now.
It's funny because of course there's like a Stephen King book that I read where you hop into the persona or the perspective of the guy that was the murderer, and then you also are along with the detective. The book's called Mr. Mercedes. It's really good actually, but it just hops point of view, and even though you know who the murderer is, it's kind of crazy because you're watching him get chased, and you're also kind of he's getting away, but you don't want him to get away because he's a bad guy, but you're not on it. It's not like Dexter where you're on the bad guy's team because he's secretly kind of he's like a, what do they call him? Like a vigilante, sort of like a martyr for but he's just straight up bad, he's he's killing kids and stuff, and it's just kind of, it's cool because he'd hop between two different things. So in that way he did it in a good way. But I see exactly what you're saying. If the point of it, another book that I read, that J.K. Rowling did a side shoot of a murder detective series. If I had to pick that book up and read it again, I probably wouldn't care because I already know who did it. It was kind of a see-through plot, in my opinion, honestly. I didn't call it all, but after reading through it, I was like, that's just kind of a typical mystery story, which is fine because it was our first, shot out into the mystery world. So good honor for writing a mystery book that was, and it did really well, and a lot of people liked it. But I guess maybe it just wasn't for me. So. But in this one, I feel like this is probably, I'm excited. I feel like
I think we know what the end result is that there's a revolution.
Yeah,
or maybe not even a revolution, but just they cleanse the Scythedom or maybe even just absolve the Scythedom, or not absolve, I keep saying that word and it's not correct, dissolve the Scythedom entirely and, born from it as something different. Or maybe we get some reveal about the Thunderhead that actually, reveals that it is evil to some degree. And so everything has to be changed. But I mean, that's like kind of the ultimate goal that's being set up right now.
I think that it's going to be a fun book to like come back to in a couple years or whatever. I hate to say that because we're doing it now, but I think it'll be fun to like read this one, buy the series, read the series, because it seems like this will be a quick read. Like not that I was listening to the audio today, and it didn't take it took me 4 hours or something, so like it still took a long time, but listening to the audio and knocking it out, it felt just like it felt like a similar pace, I guess, to the last book, and at least with the format of the writing, and it felt like an easy enough read to where we could blast through it relatively quick, like we're doing in 3 episodes. So I think reading it on the side, even as a series, would be fun, and it'll be something I could knock out pretty quick and then come back to. Like with Hunger Games, I read that series like once through, and then I think I read it again, and then I was like done with it, and I feel like this is something I might do that with too, I'll read it now and then I'll read it again like in a couple years and just be like, that was good, and then maybe I'll go back to it again. I like rereading series, so I guess I'm saying this I feel like is going to have some good replay value.
Oh, okay, yeah, I gotcha.
Same thing with Descendant of the Crane. I think that'll have some good replay value, but we already talked about that one.
Right, yeah. I am super duper excited about whatever is gonna, even if it's not immediately the next Descendant of the Crane novel, I am excited to see what else Joan Hood writes.
Yeah, she got 2 lifelong fans just from that.
Yeah, I really did love that book.
It was good.
But in any case, like you said, that was the past series of episodes.
I mean, she recommended this one, so that's why we're giving her a shout out.
Right, yeah.
I mean, she's got good taste, so I like this genre we're floating through too, like the young adult kind of.
Young adult stuff is exciting because it's written for young adults.
Yeah, and that's when everyone's kind of going through a transition phase.
And often by young
puberty
adults,
story. Yeah, I mean, a lot of anime too, I think, is written sort of for the young adult. And
well, it's definitely the
crowd.
crowd.
The yeah, the crowd. And what's so funny about anime is that I feel like so many more people are into it than want to admit it. Like,
oh, absolutely. We have a friend, which I don't know if he's told you this, but he is a very huge, and I don't even want to mention his name here because I don't want to betray him, but he is a huge anime fan.
That's awesome.
And I might be, aside from his brother, who also watches a lot of anime but is less ashamed of it, I think I might be one of like maybe 3 people that he even knows. Because he told me, he was like, I don't want a lot of people to know that I watch as much anime as I do.
I know, dude. Like Chris D'Elia, actually, he said he's a big anime fan. He's like, I don't talk about it often, though. Like, I heard it, like, after listening to, like, 120 of his podcast episodes, like, I heard him mention it once.
It is a mildly shameful thing to admit fandom to in America.
Yeah.
And even, like, at least as far as, like, humor and jokes go that I have seen and, less related things in Japan, people who are into anime do get made fun of to some degree just because they're like nerds or whatever.
I wonder
but if you admit to watching anime to someone who doesn't watch anime in America, they immediately start talking about tentacle porn and stuff like that. They just start making fun of you for all the worst examples of it.
Yeah. I wonder too if it has anything to do with kind of like being sort of like, since it is kind of targeted for like a young adult setting, kind of like how these books are, but there's not as much embarrassment in admitting, reading a bunch of young adult books.
I think because a lot of people don't read anymore.
Yeah,
so just the idea that you are reading is sort of like a noble thing.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's any, I wonder if there's any sort of like, weirdness with anime just because it is targeted to that like age group, like the coming of like puberty, like maybe you grow out of it because like,
well, it's also it's cartoons and cartoons are for children in America,
right? Yeah,
there's only in the past 6 or 7 years that there have been more adult themed cartoons hitting a wider audience. Adult Swim's been doing it for my whole life, but even a lot of that just kind of got overshadowed because it was only on for 6 hours at night on one channel, and now there's like adult themed cartoons across several channels, so it's starting to grow, and that sentiment will change in time like all things do, but that's the main thing in my opinion, is that cartoons are for children in America.
And Yeah, I mean, and I guess you can't really just say, like, hey, this book is for children. Like, a book is for children. You know, even children's books,
because
people say,
books
hey,
and novels have transcended to a place of reverence in the general psyche of society.
Yeah.
Now, definitely people who are avid readers might snark at people who only read young adult things, in the same way that people who only listen to progressive metal might snark at people who listen to new metal. Well, there's always elitism within any sort of subculture.
Sure. I guess maybe a similar sort of elitism with this might be like like reading a graphic novel like Watchmen. Like, it's a picture book rather than a book that only has words, so you have to use your imagination. Like, whereas with Watchmen, it's like, well, half of the page is the picture, so you're just reading a quarter of a page. Are you even reading? You're just looking at pictures.
And then even the people who read, not all of them, but the what I imagine a classic Watchmen fan to say is like, they'll be like, it's not a comic, it's a graphic novel. You know?
Exactly.
There's levels of elitism at every level of subculture, but yeah, like in general, right. In general, reading is something that doesn't get done anymore, and so whenever you tell somebody I'm reading a book, and if they don't read them, I'd be like, oh wow, you read a lot, good for you. Or
like, oh, that's cool, you read. Yeah.
Maybe if they're like a total asshole, I'd be like, oh, you read, fucking nerd. But like, I don't think that sentiment exists as much as it used to.
What a douche, making fun of people for reading.
Right?
Fucking nerd.
I don't think people do that anymore.
I don't think so. I think they do though. I think they did growing up. Yeah, but like, that's so funny.
Yeah. In any case.
Yeah, so for next week, you want to do...
This is exciting. I'm excited, excuse me, to continue on with it.
Yeah, me too. And we're just reading the third section, right?
Yeah, because it on its own is a very large section, and relative to the other sections. Let me go ahead and just pull it up to put some numbers to that idea. Part 3 is a whopping 160 some odd pages.
Okay.
Which is almost as much as what we've read this section, parts 1 and 2. So yeah, part 3 is definitely the meat of the story, and will take up a whole episode on its own.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And then, yeah. So dude, we're knocking this one out quick. So this will be fun.
Yeah,
I like the quick ones. I like all of them. Honestly, we've been knocking them out. I think with our choices.
As we've gotten into the rhythm of how we want to actually present this show, yeah, we're getting through it a lot quicker, which I think is probably a good thing, as opposed to however long it took us to get through Neverwhere.
I think 5.
5?
Yeah, I think
maybe
it
so.
Was 5.
I felt like the number was 6, but I could be wrong.
I think we did a 6th episode.
Oh, Salem's Lot was 6, and then we did a 7th episode for the movie.
Yeah, we took
that took a long time, but that was a long book too.
It was a long one, and it was our first time diving into it. That was like our probably. Well, I mean, I don't want to say our first like adult book, but it was like it wasn't a young adult book. It was straight up Stephen King, and one of his.
It was definitely heavier.
Epics. Yeah, it was heavier. Maybe
in relation to everything that we've read, I think it may have been the heaviest.
Yeah.
Unless you want to just count Arthur and George as the heaviest, because it literally happened to real people.
Yeah.
But that's a matter of perspective. In any case.
Yeah.
We'll see y'all next week with the potentially epic conclusion to Game of Thrones.
We're hitting it
as a
positive
TV franchise.
It will be epic.
Jordan's hitting it positive. I'm hitting it the same way I have this whole season, with almost complete indifference.
And that's good, because you haven't
been... And acceptance of the fact that it's just not what it used to be.
And you haven't been let down, but you haven't been blown off your...
it has exactly met my expectations.
That's good. That's exactly how it should be. So that's good. And for me, I let it take me down this week, but I'm not going to let it take me down next week. I'm going to let the era end on an awesome note.
Yeah, we'll see. Bonus Game of Thrones content for our actual listeners who don't only listen to Game of Thrones. What is up with Varys taking his rings off before he gets killed?
Yeah, that's a great point, dude.
That seems like they put too much... why would they show that if it didn't end up being a thing?
And
he does a weird movement with the first one that he takes off. Like, he twists it a little bit before he takes it off. And then puts him, in a glass. Does Martha then come back and get the rings because there's some secret message in them that she can then distribute to spread the word of Jon being the right heir? How many of those messages of Jon being the rightful heir did he get out before he has to stop? Mm-hmm. There are questions that could be answered or completely ignored.
Yeah, but why it was so deliberate. That's a great point. It was so deliberate.
So was the scene with Bronn coming to threaten Tyrion and Jaime.
God, what a waste
and
of
that
time
seems to have
was.
been a waste of time. So, it could also just be a totally other red herring that people who are used to the intricacy of the show are now just grasping at theories on.
Yeah. And
so, who knows?
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning, but who knows?
For sure. And with how this week was, I don't think there are going to be many more twists. I think it'll be sort of straightforward, kind of.
The only purpose that it would serve would just be to provide a vehicle for the truth of Jon to get out to the general populace, or to more people that are in power to then rally behind in the coming fight against Dany.
Yeah.
And so it would just make it a little bit more believable than just Sansa shows up with everybody because she took the time to go talk to everybody. I don't think that that seems less believable than Varys having one last thing that he did, know? So.
Segue back to Scythe. It is interesting reading a book where people don't die. Like, that's kind of the thing. They don't die unless we choose them to die. So it's like, it's like a premeditated.
It puts all the stakes in a totally different perspective.
Exactly. It's very interesting, and especially with how big as the stakes are, or the stakes were with Game of Thrones. So like it's fun to kind of have this one in perspective, because the last Descendant of the Crane had a lot of fun parts because there were a lot of strong female lead characters, Cersei and Sansa and Arya, all kind of leading in their own way, ruling in their own ways, and kind of maybe not necessarily ruling in Arya's sense, but kind of being leaders in their own ways. And then with Descendant of the Crane, Hesse was coming into her own and ruling and leading in her own way. So that was cool because that related a lot. And this one is kind of cool because it's like we're at the end where we were both saying like everybody's going to die, we're killing everybody off, and then now we're reading a book where you can't kill people off really. It's cool. It's funny how they lined up like that. I think
they say that 5 million people die a year at the current glean rate, and we don't know what the populace of the world is.
No.
But if it's been expanding for 1,000 years since mortality was defeated, like this says, nobody knows, and the world's population is currently at 7 billion, and we assume that within 50 years we progress to maybe like twice that because the population growth rate is accelerating at an alarming rate in real life, then so say there's like 15 billion people on the planet whenever we beat mortality, and it's continuing to grow, and there's only 5 million that die a year. I don't know why I'm doing all this math. But the stakes are considerably low, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And it'll be kind of cool to see
Unless you count the general stake of society as in its own existence because of the corruption of the only actual power in the world.
That's a good point, yeah. Those are the stakes, the corruption and the Scythedom, and that's... that's an interesting way to look at it. Look at that. We made Game of Thrones relate to Scythe. Cool. Dude, nice. I'm excited. This is going to be a good week of reading and watching. Yeah.
I hope that I can keep up with it a little bit better than I have been. I've just been so busy the past 2 weekends that I did not give myself time to do anything on my days off.
I really want to get...
Because I want to continue on with Red Seas Under Red Skies.
That's exactly what I was
really enjoying it when I was reading it.
That's exactly
and
what
I haven't read it for like 3 weeks. So hopefully I can keep up with this because I'm enjoying it to the point where I can keep up with that.
Dude, you read my mind. That's exactly what I was going to say. I wanted to get that book so I could start reading it along with you. And then
I read the first 4 chapters, I think, before I ran out of time. And it's been just as enjoyable as Lies of Loch Yeah, so...
Yeah, man, I'll have to buy that for my Kindle too, just so that I can have the whole series. I'm such a nerd with that kind of stuff. Like, I gotta have the full collection.
I know that's the one thing that I don't like about my Kindle is that my physical collection is not growing like it used to.
Yeah, same.
But whatever. These are all first world problems. I need a bookshelf.
That's the world we live in, man.
I'm still buying books. They're coming out with anniversary editions of the Harry Potter novels.
Oh, cool.
They're 10-year anniversaries or whatever it is. I can't remember.
Maybe that's the perfect time for our...
God, it's older than I think it is.
That might be the perfect excuse for our one-off Harry
Potter.
But
they're coming out with them in-house colors. So you can get each of them in whichever house color you want.
Oh, God, and it makes the super nerds want all 4.
Yeah.
That would be
the
me.
third one will be
like
coming
every color.
Right, yeah. So Prisoner of Azkaban will be coming out this year.
Oh.
And I bought the first 2. I bought Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets, although it's actually the Philosopher's Stone, because it's just an English printing company that's doing it, so I had to get the English version. So it's the Philosopher's Stone.
You traitor.
I push up my glasses as I say that.
Philosopher's.
Well, we will see y'all next week, as we always do with Game of Thrones, at least as we always do for the last 5 weeks. And then we will see you next Wednesday with the continuation of our coverage of Scythe. We need to decide if we're going to continue doing 2 episodes a week or not, and if we do, what the second episode is going to be about.
Yeah, and I've been enjoying doing the second episode. I don't.
It's worked out well since we've been able to dedicate this specific time on Mondays, with our schedules for it.
Yeah.
Being able to have that nailed down as a specific thing has worked. So we'll see what happens. We'll figure something out.
I'd like to, at least. It's been fun putting out 2. As long as it's not too much extra work, then I think we should.
Yeah.
Try and find something.
Yeah, we'll find something. In any case, we'll see you all then. I'm Will Hedrick.
I'm Jordan Schaffer.
This is Dog Ears and Timestamps. Go Bruins.